To observe the verification process. So we were doing this within a formality. And in our engagement with the IEBC over the period in which they were verifying, although we were not allowed much access in terms of getting all the data that would have required for a thorough, much more comprehensive analysis of what they were able to present, the snapshots of what we were able to see, and that what I've also displayed at this press conference was shared with them. I was told, well, we are seeing this. They say they would make an assessment at the end of the process. From their process, and I want to make this very clear, from their process, if you look at the way they have done the analysis in terms of either duplicate signatures or missing details, they say around 200,000? 200,000 were not authentic. Now, that could be part of what we were able to see. But why we are insisting on the issue of consent and also publishing is that we did not see the entirety of those records. And it would be therefore prudent for IEBC, if they wanted to prove this beyond reasonable doubt that 1.2 million signatures were authentic or the petitioners were authentic in their consent, that you publish this to the public. And that was an agreement. Actually, we asked them, and that's why they say, at the end of the process, we shall publish this. That's what we'd like to see done. We know they've already given the green light to move to the next direction. If there's an opportunity to create transparency in the process, I think they should utilize it. Any other question in English? Because I'll respond to the issue when you come to the Swahili. We have a snapshot of some of the pictures that we took in respect to the books which were where the signatures or the forms which are the signed, where the petitions were able to sign. And from what we can be able to see from our own snapshot, some of the signatures are very, very similar, which nearly looks like the same way. You remember the Okoa Kenya initiative where we had a number of signatures, and we also observed that process, and we saw the same thing, or same patterns. So the questions of authenticity, the questions of whether these people were really the ones signing that form, are issues that we think needs to be addressed moving forward. I also want to reiterate before I read the recommendations that we had discussed with IEBC about the process in which they were going to take. So what they told us from the onset was that they were going to, once the verification process was over, they would publish those signatures, the ones that are vetted. So the 1.2 million would be published or publicized in a manner that the individuals who are given their consent could be able to confirm. That would be a further way of authenticating the process. We understand this has not been done. But we must also quickly note that we know that the IEBC had previously, before the Punguza Mzigo initiative, had published those signatures or those details in their website. But I don't know how many of you were aware that IEBC had done that before the verification process. But what we needed was after the verification process, after the vetting, we need to see the same exercise being done with much more public awareness. That was not done, and that is a point of concern as far as Elog is concerned, because that is part of the first recommendations that we are talking about, that in regard to opening data or opening up information for public scrutiny and public participation. So where in regard, like in this particular scenario, we had that there was no repository of signatures, IEBC needed to publish those names in the Kenya Gazette or in any other public medium in compliance with the open data principles that say everybody needs to get information so that they can be able to make decisions. So that those whose details were captured in the forms can confirm that they consented to that petition. And this is a critical issue that would further authenticate the process, enhance transparency, and avoid unnecessary litigation. So we are still saying, can we still be able to publish? Well, our recommendations, can IEBC still be able to publish the 1.2 million signatures for public scrutiny, and so that people can be able to, we can be sure it was 1.2 million signatures. The second recommendation involves the legal framework, that there is a need to fast-track a referendum regime. While Elog notes that a referendum bill 2019 has already been developed to operationalize Article 5257, it has never been tabled in Parliament. And in the absence of a standalone statute on the referendum, the Commission has been relying on Part 4 of the Elections Act 2011 that provides for the conduct of the referendum. The provisions are still inadequate to support the entire referendum process. And this is very clear, even from this particular petition process itself. Apart from the Constitution giving us guidelines in terms of there's going to be 3 months in the county assembly, we don't know about any other timelines. There are no timelines for even this petition, the verification process, in terms of how do you guide the process all the way to the referendum. So we still have absence in terms of regulations, and we think, therefore, the bill that was initiated by the IBC itself needs to be tabled in Parliament and needs to be worked on as soon as possible. Remember, there are still concerns about even other or future other initiatives which may even end up in a referendum. So we need to have clarity in terms of how the legal framework guides this particular process. The third recommendation is on the establishment of an electoral fund. Elog notes with concern that IBC's lack of an independent fund continues to hamper its operations and processes, and therefore proposes that an independent fund similar to the political parties fund be established to give the Commission independence and autonomy in budgeting and execution of its mandate. We noted that IBC delayed even this process in the first instance. Why? Because they never had money to run. And even when they did, they still got some little funds which allowed them to be able to do the operation or the verification exercise for only 2 weeks, until they got more funds and extended it to a month. So they are being given dole-outs through the government. And therefore, if they had their own fund, perhaps they would have governed and managed the process in a better way. There are other existing and electoral environment issues that Elog would like to note in this particular press conference. Number one is that IEBC has continued to operate without the full constitution of the Commission since the resignation of 4 of its 7 commissioners, despite clear provisions of the law. While we note that there were directions which were given by the court on this particular matter, the failure to replace the vacancies by the President is indicative of lacking of political goodwill towards the management of electoral processes in the country. And Elog proposes that that process to address this status be commenced immediately. The Constitution is very clear that we have 7 commissioners, or we're supposed to be having 7 commissioners. And despite the fact that the court did give some declaration saying they could not invalidate the 3 commissioners who are there, the fact that Kenyans envisaged a commission of 7 individuals and that the law does state that anyway is something that needs to be of concern to everybody, that we still don't have anybody or a process to fill those vacancies. And we don't believe those who say that there's a lacuna in the law or there's a gap in the law in terms of having those commissioners in place. I think we have very good, a good framework that can allow the President to initiate. He's actually the one who's supposed to initiate the process of getting the 4 commissioners into the commission. And the second issue is that a number of electoral reform processes are simultaneously being undertaken currently by different actors. The Parliament, there are quite a number of bills which are in Parliament which are targeting electoral reforms. We know that the BBI initiative is also part of its mandate is to address issues to do with the divisive elections, and therefore they've been receiving a lot of information around that. We also know that the faith-based organizations and CSOs are also mobilizing citizens to address the same issues. And now we also have the Punguza Mzigo process, which are all looking towards reforming the electoral process in the country. Elog proposes that parliaments needs to take a leadership role, especially in harmonizing these processes. There are many questions everybody is asking. If the BBI initiative, for instance, goes on to recommend another referendum, and we already have one now based on the legal guidance, the Punguza Mzigo is headed the same direction. Are we going to be having 2 referenda? Are we going to, is there a way in which we can be able to put everything together and work on one clear path, which is what we are recommending as Elog, We need to have a clear path so that the people can have clarity first on the issues that are being canvassed, and that the citizens therefore will be able to participate much more effectively in making the decisions about the kind of electoral environment or framework that they need to have. On our part as Elog, we will continue to inform and track the current electoral reform processes by facilitating targeted stakeholder engagements and observation of the reform initiatives being undertaken by the different actors. We will also be releasing bi-monthly progress reports on the state of electoral preparedness in the country through our online newsletter, the Darubini ya Uchaguzi. And then we shall also be working, we are currently working with Raia on what we are calling a referendum watch series, which is basically a platform that allows us to be able to inform Kenyans or keep Kenyans abreast on the topical issues that are being discussed around the holding of a referendum. And this initiative seeks to provide more objective assessment of the issues that are being canvassed within the political spaces. So what Elog, Raia, and others are trying to do is that they pick up what is being discussed in political platforms, and then we are able to assess it and then discern what the issues are, what needs to go to a referendum, what does not need to go to a referendum, what is just hot air, and then share that with the members of the public. So that's the end of our statement.